Greetings to you all and welcome to BackToAshes. To the elite members, thank you so much for your love and dedication to the channel, and to myself, words cannot express my gratitude. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes, for once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Paranormal Encounters. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad, and after that, there will be no more ads within this video. When I was in high school, I dated a girl during my junior and senior years. After that relationship crashed and burned, I was desperate to leave my hometown and start anew. My older sister, who lived in Oklahoma City at the time, thought she could get me a job, so I took the plunge. Within a week of graduating high school, I packed up everything I owned and moved over 1,000 miles away to a city I'd never even visited. It wasn't a huge culture shock, but there were some adjustments to make. The job I had lined up started at 5 a.m., which meant learning a whole new sleep schedule, going to bed early and waking up at around 4 a.m. I worked at a factory near an Air Force base, and my commute took me along the edge of town. I'd weave through sparse neighborhoods, but much of the drive was through rolling fields of tall grass. Every day I'd pass a creepy, abandoned building, more isolated than the other properties on that stretch of road. In the mornings, it loomed like a stark black phantom among the trees, looking like a hole punched through the fabric of reality. Darker than dark, if that makes any sense. I didn't think much of it. It was just part of my commute. By the afternoon, around 2 p.m., the sun revealed it as a ratty old brick-and-mortar building, abandoned, somewhat vandalized, and fairly large. After a year of driving by it daily, I figured it might have been a school or an office building. While living in Oklahoma City, I met a guy named Stefan, who worked at a movie rental store near my place. Since I was new in town, I spent a lot of weekends renting movies, and Stefan became my first friend there. He was tall, handsome, and reclusive, with dreams of becoming a certified embalmer for a local mortuary. Stefan had peculiar interests and loved playing practical jokes, like pretending he had a pocket full of loose cadaver teeth. He was obsessed with horror movies, scary movies, and anything that got the heart pumping. Oklahoma isn't the oldest or most cultured place in America, but it has an odd amount of allegedly haunted sites. Stefan loved investigating wherever he could find. Random rumors we overheard at the video store or stuff he found online. Once or twice a month, he dragged me along on some middle-of-the-night adventure to hunt for ghosts or monsters. One day, I got home from work, and Stefan was already there, waiting for me. He had one foot kicked out of his car window, smoking a cigarette in the unforgiving Oklahoma humidity. As I pulled into the driveway, he sprang to his feet and rushed over, already talking before I even rolled down my window. "Dude, there's this place we gotta go look at," he said, buzzing with excitement. "What is it?" I asked. "I don't know, but I've always wanted to check it out. It's just up the road," he replied. I went inside, changed my clothes, and we hit the road. This was unusual since we typically did our ghost hunting at night, often sneaking into condemned or private properties. I didn't know what to expect with it being so early. Stefan and I smoked a couple of closed cigarettes, the snap crackly ones all the hipsters smoked back then, as we drove. The route was familiar, a slightly modified version of my work commute. I was stunned when we pulled up to the old brick building I passed every day. "Damn, really?" I said. I know this place. I drive by it all the time. Me too, Stefan confessed, and I've always wanted to see what it is. Why are we doing this now in the middle of the day? I asked. He pointed to a real estate sign near the driveway entrance that read, "For sale" in big red letters. It was a genius move. The sign gave us an excuse to explore the property openly, posing as potential investors without having to snoop around in the dark with flashlights and pocket knives, risking real danger. Little did we know, we'd be in danger either way. We parked, got into character, and played it cool. We'd done plenty of breaking and entering, but not much lying to gain access. We were young, driving a Toyota Matrix, and definitely not dressed like millionaires. If anyone asked for credentials, we'd have to sell a convincing story to stay on the property. To our delight, the place was completely empty. No cars, no people, just us and the for sale sign. We got out and walked around the front yard first, assuming the place might be under 24-hour camera surveillance. It was a dump, but a huge facility, perfect for a hobo hotel. We commented on the trees, looked for cameras, and found none. It was time to explore. I felt caught up in the mystery, maybe because I was a transplant and this place, which I'd come to know on my own, had been on the mind of a true local like Stefan. We approached what I thought was the front of the building, a massive brick broadside with narrow windows at the top, big wide ones at ground level, and narrow ones along the basement. Almost every window was smashed, offering a glimpse into the twisted shadows inside. We crouched to peer into the basement, and it looked like a tornado had torn through it. The concrete walls and floors were shattered, paint and dirt splattered everywhere, with evidence of a fire in one corner and furniture smashed into splinters. Drywall and insulation were reduced to dust and mold. Amid the wreckage sat a single wooden chair, upright, facing us, with a white balloon tied to its back, floating a foot or two in the air, full of helium like a party balloon. It creeped us out, but also thrilled us. This place was definitely weird. Realizing this side had no door, we walked around to the east side and found a staircase leading to a wide opening with hinges but no doors. Someone or something had blown the double doors open, allowing anything to come and go. An old dying tree stretched over the entrance, and beneath its scraggly limbs, we saw the name, St. Vincent's Home for Boys, in faded block letters with a black accent bar. Caught off guard, but emboldened by the for sale sign, we ascended the stairs into a long hallway with a staircase landing. A small desk was pushed against the far wall, its top covered with 2 or 3 inches of multicolored wax that ran down the legs and pooled on the floor. Wicks and scorch marks revealed that someone had burned dozens of candles on it, coating the entire thing. On the wall behind were painted words, the only ones I recall being, "We all die." The rest might have been in Latin. This place was a creep show from top to bottom. We explored the hall, finding creepy stuff on the walls, old clothes and briefcases scattered in identical rooms that resembled an old-timey hotel. The clothes and items were seriously dated, like they'd been abandoned decades ago. In one room, I found a sealed desk drawer Jimmy did open and discovered 70-year-old medical records with names and social security numbers. Unbelievable. Forgotten information. The top floor was like a time capsule, aside from the scary threats and ominous messages painted on the walls. We found dark, steep stairs of crumbling concrete leading to the basement. Halfway down, we found a piece of thick, bendy rubber doll, the kind that comes apart if pulled hard enough. The basement was filled with thousands of them in various states of disassembly, some intact, with crazy faces painted on, haircut into wild styles and half splattered with red paint. It was the weirdest thing, and Stefan and I were kind of into it. This place had everything our strange hearts desired. But then, we heard a strange sound in the basement, like a metal door slamming shut. We looked around but found no metal door, only warped metal desks, too bent to close like that. We even found an unopened safe, about the size of an end table, still unpried from the floor. More creepy stuff was painted on the walls. Stefan lingered near the chair and balloon, fascinated by the candles burned in a circle around it. I stepped into a large bathroom with tiled showers and multiple toilets, like a 1950s gym bathroom with checkered tiles and a drain in the floor. By the sinks were rusted-out medicine cabinets, most shattered. I moved one back and forth. It still had good rotation. On a hunch, I slammed its metal frame and perfectly recreated the slamming sound we'd heard. Mystery solved. I found Stefan, wide-eyed and ready to bolt. I showed him the bathroom and explained. We explored more rooms, finding evidence of weird seances or rituals. Stefan had read about cults and devil worshippers, allegedly active in the area. As we explored the back bedrooms, we heard the scariest thing. A man coughing or trying to clear his throat, coming from the walls. It turned into gasping and guttural sounds, growing louder until we bolted back the way we came, out into the sunlight. The basement felt like another world, pitch black. I swear, just before reaching the first floor, the choking turned to laughter for a split second. Stefan didn't hear it, already racing ahead to escape. As we climbed the stairs, a tremendous banging came from the concrete behind us, like the medicine cabinet clatter multiplied by 1,000, shaking the building with a deafening metallic sound. We had no idea what it was. Back topside, nothing had changed. No cops, no real estate agents, no property owner. We explored the last few rooms, snapped pictures, and drove back to my place to debrief. The first thing I did was research St. Vincent's Home for Boys. To our shock, it opened in the 1940s as a mental asylum run by the Brothers of Mercy, a Catholic rehabilitation group. Allegations of physical, mental, and sexual abuse surfaced from patients aged 9 to 90 against multiple male nurse staff. Murder allegations followed. One nurse confessed to suffocating 2 patients just to see what it was like. St. Vincent's kept expanding, adding rooms to house more patients, all male with only male staff. After the murder confession, the facility transitioned to Richard Dolan, a priest and rehab consultant, who planned to turn it into an all-male drug and alcohol clinic, where patients lived on site, receiving prayer and treatment while working jobs for room and board. Dolan, arrested for soliciting sex from an undercover male officer and rumored to hire men for odd favors, ran it as the main artery for a few years, until he was found beaten to death in his apartment in 1988, an unsolved murder. Stefan and I found all this in an hour of Googling. A semi-local ghost hunting team had visited recently, with videos of the same halls and EVP recordings of a deep male voice saying, "Leave," or "Help." It was unsettling and brought me to tears. Knowing people had been murdered there for fun made the sounds we heard sickeningly real. My commute became dreadful, knowing I'd been driving past one of Oklahoma's most haunted buildings. St. Vincent's Home for Boys still stands, still for sale, for anyone brave enough to buy it. This is the first time I've shared my encounter publicly. I am a spiritual individual, leaning toward polytheism, with the belief that many things exist beyond our understanding. However, I've had very few personal one-on-one encounters. I've experienced a couple of ghost-like situations, but that's about it. As a skeptic, I've always tried to rule out all logical explanations before considering the paranormal. I don't often see things, I feel them. I trust my gut. Until last year. I had never encountered anything that didn't feel human. The experience has stayed with me ever since. I worked at a long-term healthcare facility for 3 years. It was my first healthcare job, and I genuinely enjoyed it, despite the heavy energy in the facility. I had heard unexplained noises, seen shadowy figures moving throughout the halls, watched doors close on their own, and even been shoved once. I grew accustomed to the idea that many patients' spirits lingered in the halls. Death was something we had to be comfortable with to work there. One particular morning, while walking down my designated hall, the air suddenly shifted. It became thick and heavy, almost like a dense fog filled the space, though nothing was visible. Goosebumps prickled my skin, and I felt deeply uncomfortable. My brain seemed to switch into fight or flight mode, with every sense on high alert. As I reached the end of the hall, I looked into one of the rooms and saw something I'll never forget. I saw it in my mind's eye, a phrase I once thought was nonsense until I experienced it firsthand. It was as if I saw something clearly without physically seeing it. In a chair near the doorway, a being sat watching an elderly woman in the far corner. I was transfixed, unable to move. I could only stare. The being had no discernible facial or bodily features. It appeared as a black silhouette, but instead of a solid shadow, it moved like ink swirling in water, undulating. At its core, from what would be the torso to the hip area of a human, was a white glow that faded into the black. There were no arms, only large draped shapes resembling a robe. The head was a distinct cowl shape, similar to depictions of Mother Mary in Catholic artwork, though I've never been Catholic or Christian, so this wasn't an image my mind would naturally conjure. The being felt massive, as if it could fill the entire room if it chose to. It was ominous, but not overtly threatening. I sensed no good or evil, just neutrality. Strangely, I felt it was aware of me and had permitted me to see it. It felt neither masculine nor feminine, and it certainly didn't feel human. It seemed almost omnipotent, yet unsettlingly calm. Tears began streaming down my face. My body felt hot. Overwhelmed, I ran outside to sit and suddenly sobbed. This was unlike me. I've always remained calm in crises, even when finding deceased patients or handling medical emergencies. I couldn't explain the fear and profound respect I felt, as though I had encountered something utterly unlike anything before. After calming down, I returned inside. The air still felt heavy. I passed the room, and the being was still there, unchanged. There was no further acknowledgement. Soon, nurses hurried into the room to check the woman's vitals and inform the staff that she had entered the dying process. Her family was on their way. For 2 or more hours, I continued my work, pretending to be casual while the entity remained in place. But as soon as her family arrived, it vanished. The air returned to normal, and the electrical tension in the space dissipated. The elderly woman lived for a few more days, surrounded by her visiting family. The being never returned. I found the experience oddly beautiful in the end. It was as if the entity kept her company until her loved ones arrived, perhaps giving her a choice to leave or stay a bit longer. Her death was peaceful, though I've seen many patients come and go since. I've never encountered that entity again. I still feel awe when I think of it. The fear has faded, but the memory remains, the only truly paranormal experience I've had. It was brief, but whatever it was, felt dangerously powerful, as if it could be formidable if it chose to be. I remember the shadows more than anything else, the way they clung to the edges of our world like hungry ghosts, waiting for the light to falter. My name is not important now. I've carried too many secrets to let it matter. But this story, the one has burrowed into my bones, festering like an untreated wound. It happened during the Secret War, that hidden nightmare in Laos, where the Americans slithered in like serpents, promising protection while their bombs tore the earth apart. I was young then, barely a teenager, my body still soft from childhood, but my eyes had already seen too much death. The jungle whispered warnings we couldn't ignore, and the nights, oh, the nights were alive with things that shouldn't exist. Our village clung to the hills like a forgotten scar. Narrow paths winding through the thick foliage where the Ho Chi Minh Trail supposedly snaked its way toward Vietnam. The CIA's men came first. Boots on the ground, they called it, poking into every hut, every shadow, hunting for weapons, supplies, anything that smelled of the enemy. They were giants to us, these American soldiers, with their pale skin and strange tongues, their rifles slung like extensions of their arms. One of them caught the eye of my aunt, whom I'll call Anna to spare her the indignity of being named in such a tale. She was beautiful in a wild way, her hair like midnight silk, her laughter a rare spark in the gloom. He started lingering on the outskirts of the village, where the trees met the rice fields, his uniform stained with the red earth of our land. At first, it was just words, halting, awkward exchanges that bridged the chasm between our worlds. He learned scraps of our language, the ancient Hmong dialect that rolled like river stones from our lips. Gifts followed, a tin of sweets from his rations, a stolen flower pressed between his fingers. Their hands intertwined under the canopy, hidden from prying eyes. Anna spoke of him in hushed tones, her cheeks flushed with a fever I mistook for love. "He's different," she'd whispered to me as we pounded rice in the dim light of our hut. "He sees a future beyond this war, a place where the bombs don't fall." But even then, I felt it a subtle rot beneath the romance, like fruit turning soft and black from the inside. His eyes held a hunger that wasn't just for her. It was deeper, more primal, as if he were studying her, memorizing the curve of her neck, the rhythm of her breath. Then, one week, he vanished. No farewell, no trace. People disappeared all the time in those days, swallowed by the jungle, cut down by gunfire, echoing from the distant hills, or dragged away in the night by forces we dared not name. Battles raged along the borders, the air thick with the acrid stench of gunpowder and blood. Anna was shattered, her spirit fracturing like brittle clay. She'd wait for him every evening on the village edge, her silhouette stark against the fading sun, scanning the tree line as if willing him back from the void. "He's alive," she'd insist, her voice crackling like dry leaves. "You promised." But the war didn't care for promises. It escalated, morphing into something monstrous. The Americans shifted from soldiers to specters in the sky, their planes droning like angry gods, unleashing carpet bombings that razed everything in their paths. Nowhere was safe. Villages burned, jungles exploded into infernos of splintered woods and scorched earth. The CIA hunted tunnels they swore existed beneath our feet, supply lines for the Vietnamese, but all they found was more death to sow. Women fled through the trees, babies clutched to their chests, their screams drowned by the thunder of explosions. I can still see them in my dreams, figures darting like prey, only to be consumed by the blast zones that expanded like gaping maws. There was no escape. The bombs fell relentlessly, hour after hour, turning our world into a cratered wasteland. Survival became a grim calculus. We learned the bombers' rhythms, the distant hum of engines, the whistle of falling death, and timed our forays into the light. But the caves, those were our only refuge. Ancient networks carved into the mountains, like veins in a dying beast. We huddled there, families pressed together in the damp darkness, the air heavy with the scent of fear and unwashed bodies. Lanterns and candles flickered near the entrances, casting elongated shadows that danced like mocking spirits. Deeper in, the light faded, swallowed by the chasms, leaving only the echo of dripping water and the distant rumble of the world above crumbling. At night, we never ventured out. The jungle teemed with prowling soldiers, their flashlights slicing through the black like knives. And the bombers, they came in the dark, unseen and unforgiving, as if the war itself thrived on our blindness. One week stands out in my memory like a bloodstain on white cloth. The ground trembled without cease for 5 days, the earth groaning under the assault. Firefights crept closer, the crack of rifles blending into a ceaseless roar, punctuated by the wails of the wounded. Screams pierced the air, not just human, but something more guttural, as if the jungle itself were crying out. We crawled into the cave that night, burrowing deep into the stone chambers where the air hung thick and stale, far from the entrance's feeble glow. 20 or 30 of us villagers piled together for warmth, our bodies a tangled mass against the unexplored voids that stretched into oblivion. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by the vibrations shaking the walls. It was late, profoundly late, when the sound slithered through the chasm. My eyes snapped open, heart pounding like a trapped animal. The flickering light from the entrance below us, perhaps 30 feet down a gentle slope, remained undisturbed, but the noise persisted. A shambling scrape, like claws dragging over rock, uneven footsteps echoing from the depths. I lay frozen, listening, expecting it to rouse the others. But no one stirred. Their breaths remained steady, oblivious in the grip of exhaustion. Alone in the waking dark, I waited, petrified as the sound grew closer, deliberate, hunting. Then came the voice, muttering, low and disjointed, rising from the unseen abyss. At first, indistinct, but soon clear enough to chill my blood. It was him, the American soldier, his broken mong twisting like a poorly forged blade. "I'm back for you," he murmured, over and over, each repetition shifting in tone. First sorrowful, laced with a hollow ache, then joyful, unnaturally bright, excited, edged with mania, scared, trembling like a cornered beast. Laughter bubbled between phrases, not warm but jagged, chattering like teeth on bone. It was as if he, or whatever wore his voice, was rehearsing, perfecting a mimicry in the swallowing dark, testing emotions like masks. Terror clawed at me, but my young mind offered no escape. Too late to wake the others. What could we do against an armed intruder? Weapons were scarce in the caves. We were mostly women and children, defenseless lambs in a den of wolves. I squeezed my eyes shut, feigning sleep, praying for invisibility. The shambling drew nearer, ascending the rock face, its presence bloating the air with a fatigued warmth. Then it emerged, a silhouette vast and wrong, far larger than any man, eclipsing the faint light like an eclipse of doom. It loomed taller with each step, wider, its form distorting the shadows into grotesque parodies. Through my lashes, I glimpsed it. Not human, but a hulking mass, furred and primal, moving with an unnatural grace that belied its size. The breathing came next, ragged, wet, inches from my face. I sealed my eyes tight, every muscle rigid, as a heavy weight descended. A hand? No, a paw, enormous and furred like a jungle cat's, pads soft yet tipped with retractable claws that pricked my skin like needles poised to pierce. It rested on my shoulder, lingering as if savoring the contact, then slid down my arm, slow and deliberate, until it enveloped my hand. The texture was vile, coarse hair matted with something sticky, claws curling gently but threateningly. My mind screamed, but my body betrayed me, still as death. A stir in the darkness. Anna, rising silently, her movements fluid as if compelled. Words exchanged between her and the thing, her voice tentative, laced with desperate hope. Its response a guttural mimicry of the soldiers, promising return, love, escape. Then they moved, the creature leading, shambling back toward the tunnel, its bulk absorbing the light, Anna trailing, her steps hesitant yet inexorable, as if drawn by an invisible thread. I watched through slitted eyes, horror twisting my gut, as they vanished into the hollows, the echoes of their passage fading into silence. Dawn brought no relief. Anna was gone, evaporated like mist in the sun. We searched the cave's twisting passages, calling her name into the voids, but only our voices bounced back, mocking. The war swallowed her disappearance like so many others, assumed casualty, another soul claimed by the chaos. Sympathy was a luxury we couldn't afford. Survival demanded we forget, move on. But I couldn't. I was the last to see her alive, the one who laid there, paralyzed, as that abomination lured her away. Guilt gnawed at me for years, a parasite feeding on my silence. Why didn't I scream? Why didn't I fight? Perhaps because deep down I knew it wasn't just a soldier's ghost or a war's delusion. That thing wanted to be human, or had been, once, twisted by the horrors we'd unleashed. I've told this story to my grandchildren, weaving it like a cautionary shroud, honoring Anna's memory while unburdening my soul. But in the quiet nights, when the shadows lengthen, I wonder, was it born of the bombs, a mutation from the poisoned earth, or something older, awakened from the cave's depths, dawning voices like stolen skins to prey on the desperate? Whatever it was, it lingers in the dark corners of my mind, whispering in broken tones, waiting. And sometimes, in my dreams, I feel that paw on my shoulder again, cold and insistent, reminding me that some wars never end. They just burrow deeper into the soul. When I was 13, I often struggled with sleep paralysis, especially during times of high stress or anxiety. Around the time of this particular incident, I had just escaped an abusive relationship that left me in constant fear. My ex-boyfriend, who was 16, had lied about his age to groom me. The 3-year age gap felt significant at the time, and the relationship was toxic and frightening. He knew my home address, owned multiple firearms, and frequently threatened to come after me if I ever left him. Even after I ended the relationship, he continued to stalk me on social media. It wasn't until about 5 weeks after the breakup that he finally stopped trying to contact me, but the stress had already taken its toll. The sleep paralysis began around this time. At first, the episodes were terrifying but manageable. I would wake up, unable to move, struggling to breathe. However, about a week later, the experiences became far more horrifying. I was already uncomfortable being alone in my room, especially because of the closet, which had an access panel to the crawl space in the ceiling. I started hearing strange noises, tiny knocks or taps along the walls, windows, and even inside the closet. The constant feeling of being watched, particularly from the closet, made it difficult to sleep. On a few occasions, I swore I saw a man or a humanoid figure dart across the closet doorway. When I told my parents, they dismissed it, saying I was watching too many scary videos or staying up too late, causing my mind to play tricks on me. While I considered they might be right, nothing could explain the terrifying sleep paralysis episode that followed. One night I woke up in the middle of the night, immediately realizing I was in another sleep paralysis episode. My body was stiff as a board, and I could only move my eyes. I'm usually a heavy sleeper and rarely wake up at night, so I knew something must have disturbed me. As I tried to scan the room, I noticed my fan, which I always kept pointing at me while I slept, was turned off. I was certain I had turned it on before bed, but I wondered if I had forgotten it in my exhaustion. Then I saw that my closet door was slightly ajar, despite my fear-driven habit of ensuring it was closed before going to bed. My heart began to race, and I could hear it pounding in my chest. As I lay there, paralyzed, a familiar yet horrifying smell filled the room. The cologne my ex-boyfriend always wore, but now it was mixed with the stench of decay, like a dead animal. My worst fears seemed to be coming true. I thought my abusive ex had somehow gotten into my house. Tears streamed down my face as I hyperventilated, unable to move. Then I heard a small thud in the corner of my room. Mustering all my courage, I focused my eyes on the darkness and saw a tall, shadowy figure hunched over in the corner. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My breathing grew more frantic as I desperately tried to move any part of my body to reach my phone. The figure slowly turned toward me, its bony back protruding through a thin, dark cloth. Its hands were skeletal, with claw-like nails longer than the fingers themselves. As my eyes adjusted, I realized the most terrifying detail. The figure had no face. Sobbing silently, I watched as the creature moved closer, the smell of death and my ex's cologne growing stronger. It climbed onto my bed and straddled me, placing its bony hand around my throat. A chilling echo of how my ex used to scare me, including one instance when he tried to strangle me in the school library. The creature's grip tightened, and I could feel the pressure as if it were real. It began to speak in a low, monotone language that sounded like a distorted imitation of English, as if it had only heard the language a few times. The room grew icy cold, and I could see my breath. I felt like I might pass out. Suddenly, the creature stopped. It stood up, walked back to the closet, and shut the door as if nothing had happened. I could finally move again. Checking my phone, I saw it was 2:45 a.m. Still hyperventilating and sobbing, I leapt out of bed and ran to my parents' room. I threw open their door, waking them up. They were initially furious, but when they saw me crying, their anger turned to concern. I recounted the entire experience, and my dad tried to reassure me that it was just my imagination. However, when he noticed the large abrasions and marks on my neck from the creature's grip, his expression changed. He grabbed his gun and rushed to my room, throwing open the closet door. Of course, nothing was there, and the fan was inexplicably back on, as I always kept it. My dad insisted I must have imagined it, but he refused to discuss it further, and I could tell he was unnerved. The next day, my dad complained about a strange smell in my room, the same mix of my ex's cologne and decay that I had noticed. This confirmed to me that it wasn't just a dream. While I've never been a believer in the paranormal, I can't help but to think this was an encounter with a demonic entity that used the scent of my ex and his abusive tactics to terrify me. I haven't had another sleep paralysis episode since, and I hope I never do. Even now, as I write this on my bed, I still feel like I'm being watched. When I was a kid, I had various encounters that led me to believe there might be an afterlife. These weren't experiences from early childhood, but rather moments throughout my youth and teenage years. Small interactions convinced me that ghosts or some form of an afterlife existed. However, after I entered high school, nothing unusual happened for a long time, and, like clockwork, I forgot I ever believed in that stuff at all. Fast forward to my first time living away from home, during my second semester in college. I encountered something that sent me into flashbacks and reminded me of all the eerie experiences from my youth. I went to school in upstate New York, way upstate, where you discover a new level of cold. A few roommates and I lived in a creepy, rundown apartment that we all swore was haunted. The place was dingy and dark, even during daylight hours. Even with the windows open, nothing could bring light in. It made no sense. Now, I guess we know the truth. Before I go any further, I want to say for the record that I definitely asked for it. The city where I lived is known for horrible weather, which kept me indoors most of the time. Naturally, I gravitated toward ghost stories, among other things. Since I had always been fascinated by myths and legends, I spent a lot of time on the weird part of YouTube, eventually landing on pages about ghosts, spirits, and how to invite them to communicate with you. To be clear, I never used a Ouija board or anything like that. Hell no. But a few days before this event, I'd been reading and watching content about calling out to spirits by saying things like, "If anyone's there, make yourself known," or, "If someone's here, I invite you to share my company." I'd also recently learned about the concept of a succubus, which is important for this story. Another important note: the layout of my bedroom was pretty strange. The key detail is that my closet was massive and extended into the exposed attic, which made my room cold most of the time. I couldn't see into the attic part because it was at an odd angle, but I always got a creepy vibe inside the closet, so I avoided it. Most importantly, my closet didn't have a door. When I sat up in bed, all I could see across the room was a black, formless void through the closet doorway. I always found that super creepy, but at this point in my life, I was still fascinated by weird things. My room was partially illuminated by a nearby streetlight, so sometimes I didn't mind gazing into the empty black abyss of my open closet door every night. Fun, right? Aside from that, Buffalo isn't the nicest place. There had been break-ins around the neighborhood, so I kept a big hammer on a hook behind my door. If anything went down, I could grab it with a quick lunge, and it made me feel somewhat safe. Keep in mind that all this happened after many nights of me inviting things to my bedside, to no avail. This incident happened on Halloween night, ironically. I'd spent a large part of that evening drinking heavily with friends at a party. I blacked out at some point, so I wasn't sure what time I got home. My drunk self randomly woke up in my bed, facing the wall, just trying to get my bearings. Suddenly, I felt a girl I thought I'd brought home big spooning me, cuddling close with one arm wrapped around me. I heard her yawn and let out a quiet giggle before she started playfully twirling my hair and sensually drawing lines down my ribcage and back with her fingernails. Stepping out of my drunken stupor, I realized I couldn't remember who I'd brought home from the party. To me, this was kind of hilarious, and I was trying not to laugh. I was popular with some sorority girls at the time, so I thought it'd be a funny surprise to find out who'd come home with me. Then it clicked. I hadn't brought anyone home. I'd stumbled home alone, but I could still feel hands on my back, someone's legs wrapping around mine and warm breath on my neck. At that point, I freaked out. Suddenly, the legs gripped tightly around mine, like a python ensnaring its prey. Fingernails clawed into my back and wrenched my hair out of my scalp. Whoever, or whatever, was in my bed was going ballistic, attacking me like a wild animal. I was so terrified that I was completely paralyzed, too afraid to turn around. I didn't know what to do. So I started praying, begging God to help me. After a few agonizing moments, the pain became so intense that I finally sprang up. I scrambled out of bed, grabbed the hammer, and flicked on the light. There was no one there. I stood in pure awe, holding the hammer and freaking out. I went to the bathroom, got some water, and somehow went back to bed with the lights on. Eventually, I fell back asleep. In the morning, I got up, used the bathroom, and figured it was all a bad dream, until I returned to my room and saw the hammer sitting on my bedside table. From then on, I never tried to invite anything into my home. The problem is, some doors don't close that easily once you open them. And, as I said, that creepy closet didn't have one. And that, dear listeners, is going to wrap up these true paranormal encounters. I would like to acknowledge the rest of the members of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for continuing to stick with me and the channel. And thank you so much for your love and dedication. It does not go unnoticed. Without you, I wouldn't have a voice, and Back to Ashes would not exist. So thank you kindly. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you are awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Until next time, please stay vigilant and keep yourself safe. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.